Hey there, I have an interesting interview slash really conversation to bring to you. I met Sean a few days ago, literally at a tech startup event here in Vegas. We were just in the audience watching a kind of a pitch fest happening. We got talking, found out that Sean's actually from Davao, which is where my team of virtual assistants is located. But Sean was doing something very interesting, which I think you may be interested in learning more about. So, Sean, first of all, thank you so much for sparing some time to have this conversation. Look, a lot of people I believe that I want to share this with have some component of high ticket sales. And that's the conversation we're going to have here is that you actually have an AI technology that can analyze sales calls. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you so much, Vijay. To start, yes, our platform, Plarative, what we do is we analyze sales conversations to identify key points that you want to highlight.
And how long have you been doing that? How long has the software been out there?
So we first launched our software, our platform in October of last year. And as of now, we're at version 2. So we're very agile in our development. So weekly, we always put in new functionality and features into our platform.
So again, I'm going to be sharing this with some of my mastermind group members. I know many of them actually have high ticket sales as part of their operations. Can you tell us more about the software, how it works, some of the sales psychology analysis you've built into the software?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I guess the core of high ticket sales, right? It's not one conversation, right? It's not this one, you have an SDR that calls a person and then they would close it right then. The core of high ticket sales is like you have all of these multiple conversations, customer discovery, and then towards the end with the hope of being able to close that deal, right? And then what our software does is it analyzes each of those conversations so that you can identify the key themes, the key topics, the pain points. What are the key details that's been discussed from each of those conversations? Add sentiment, like was the customer positive? Was it negative? And then add other aspects in terms of like how much for each topic did we actually, I would say, consume in that meeting in regards to each of those certain points. Now, that's for each conversation. And then what we do additionally is we actually synthesize all of those themes and topics. So you have a really good view of holistically, oh, hey, I talked to, let's say, Jason about this specific thing 5 different times. And this was identified in these different meetings. So that will then give you for the lack of the better word, ammunition to be able to say, okay, this is what's relevant to Jason. This is in our next call. This is what I'm going to focus on. With that will give you the ability to be able to close faster and really provide a better solution.
And before we dive into the software here, we briefly had a conversation before we started this. So, as I mentioned, I'm in Alex Singal's mastermind, and he wrote a book called Don't Say That, essentially, basically a guidebook on how to stay compliant during the sales process, marketing, copy, etc. Is there a level of compliance check-in already in the software, or is that something that you can build in as you're developing future versions?
So what we've actually done is make our platform very configurable. So meaning, and the reason why we've done that is that each organization is, I want to say, very unique in terms that they want to look out for, right? So to quickly answer your question, yes, that's something that we can definitely incorporate into the platform specific for each organizational need, right? So if you have compliance for, let's say, HIPAA, then we can look into that. If you have compliance for other things, then we can look into that. Really, this is where we work with that organization or group to refine our models to be able to provide the appropriate output.
Got it. Cool. Why don't we just dive in? Maybe you can show us around the software and talk us through how it works and some of the nuances of the software.
Okay, so this is I would say, our core dashboard. So this basically just tells you what are the key topics that's been discussed, like how many meetings or conversations that's in the platform, what are the action items and key details. To do a quick, I want to say, demo, let me just go to how we analyze a meeting. So to do that, I'm just going to go to the meeting notes dashboard and then select a specific meeting. Let's look at the latest one that I uploaded yesterday. Here, sales team expansion and strategy session. So this meeting was then analyzed. It gives you a summary of the conversation, when that meeting was, when it was created, how long that meeting lasted, how much in terms of the meeting was it positive. So for example, it was 3% positive and about 2% negative. So sentiment. Who are the main contributors? So there was two people for the most part that spoke. What are the topics that was discussed in terms of the entire conversation? What are the main topics? And then you'll see here how much of the meeting was actually used to discuss each of those topics. And below here then is the analysis, right? So what are the key details? What are the pain points that was discussed during the conversation? What are the customer preferences that was identified? And did the customer like actually state any desired features? Are there any open questions? Or are there any knowledge gaps? The knowledge gaps is actually pretty special because it looks at all the topic in context. And our model looks at it and says, hey, yes, you talked about a certain topic, but you failed to mention or you didn't mention this other thing. For example, in this one, I didn't mention specifics on how the API calls data is used by OpenAI. It just wasn't part of the conversation. So that then gives me some data. So, hey, in my next call with this person, I was like, hey, we didn't talk about API calls in our last conversation. I'd like to cover that today. So again, it's like to help you become that trusted consultant or the trusted advisor, which is very important in high ticket sales. Now, what's great in terms of synthesis, right? So we can actually, as you look at each of these conversations, we can identify in what other meetings that this call was discussed, right? I'll just find one. This is not a real good. Let me find one that is actually pretty rich. Give me a second and you'll see it here. See how it's like this platform analyzes audio and video conversations to generate meeting notes and insights. This specific detail wasn't just discussed in this one meeting, right? This was actually discussed in 3 different meetings. So that whole analysis is actually, automated, right? How many times has this happened where like you talk to your boss, you talk to your customer, oh yeah, I heard somebody say that, but I don't remember. Oh, I know I've heard this before. Like what our platform does is actually gives you the data that's, okay, this is relevant because it's not just one person. It's not just one customer, several customers. So this may not necessarily as important to AEs and SDRs, but in terms of sales leadership, right? Because your sales leader were like, okay, how do I actually create a plan that's relevant for my market, for my customer?
And does it then look for like psychological sales triggers, or can it be used to look for psychological sales triggers if it was effective, the response to those triggers?
We can. We haven't yet built that. And I think that the reason is we want to make sure, or we'd like to work with an organization that's, okay, this is what we're looking for. This is what we want to. Our models are pretty extensible to be able to add those triggers as needed.
Right, okay. So in terms of current setup, the current software, how does it then improve future sales calls? Does it give you a list of recommendations to change certain things?
Yep. So one of the things that we do for improving future sales calls is exactly as I mentioned, the knowledge gaps, right? So once those knowledge gaps are identified, I can then plan out my future sales calls. Okay, I can cover this or I can cover these other items. The other part where we can improve future sales calls are in our topic analysis. So for example, for this one meeting of like in May 15, we talked about these different topics, right? And then I can see with the data how much each person actually spoke. So for example, Keith spoke 57% of the time in terms of AI-driven meeting insights. So I can actually identify which topics are more relevant to that prospect. So my future conversation, hey, Keith, I know in our last conversation, voice recognition was really important to you. Is that accurate? So it's really providing you with the insights, with the data that you can follow through in your future conversations.
Awesome. Very cool. Sean, if someone wants to reach out to you and to learn more and maybe take the conversation to the next level, what's the best way they can reach out to you?
The best way would be through email at sean@skryb.tech, TECH, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Sean Gigermosa on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Yeah, because as I mentioned, my hope is to share this with other members of our masterminds and who are currently doing high ticket. And again, I know for sure when I've had to listen to even my own virtual assistants, I might listen to half a call and then get bored and get busy, and I don't do it, right? So
Yeah.
for small organizations where they are doing high ticket sales, this could be a great add-on aspect. Sean, just a rough idea of pricing.
So rough idea of pricing, we're doing it right now per, I want to say per hours analyzed. So we have buckets at 50, 100, and then 500 in enterprise. Most organizations use around those three buckets. So it would start at 300, 700, and I think it's 1100 for our highest for 500 hours.
Perfect, great. I think that's very reasonable given that most people don't have the bandwidth to listen to so many calls. It could be one out of dozens of calls, if even that. And even
Yeah.
then, it's just getting a vague idea. So having something that's monitoring the sales calls, especially when we can add in little bit more sales psychology into the platform. And for me, I think with the current conversations happening in our world of high ticket sales, compliance is another big aspect of it. So I'll definitely, if I cross paths with my colleagues who are doing high ticket sales, I'll definitely be recommending they talk to you about what you're doing. Sean, hey, it was great. Thank you so much for taking some time to share this with me. And
No, of course. Oh, I
have
just wanted to add one more thing. We don't care about like users. So meaning like if your team, so you have 5 users, 100 users, it really doesn't matter. We can like you can give them access to the platform. It's really about like how many of your sales calls, your sales conversations do you want analyzed?
awesome. Appreciate it. Sean, thanks so much. And we actually live only about 5 minutes away, so we will definitely be getting together for a coffee real soon.
No, for sure. Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Bye for now.